The alien mother had nothing left except a request that moved a human to act. The Montana sun hung low over Marcus Chen's wheat farm, painting the rolling hills in shades of amber and gold. He'd been working since dawn, adjusting the irrigation system for the eastern fields when he spotted a figure stumbling across the distant ridge. At first, he thought it was a hiker who'd lost their way, the kind who collapsed from dehydration in the summer heat, but as the figure drew closer, dragging herself forward with trembling determination, Marcus realized this was no ordinary wanderer. She collapsed just beyond his property line, her unusual blue-tinted skin catching the dying light. Her clothes were torn, her hair matted with dirt and something darker. What made Marcus freeze wasn't her alien appearance, it was the desperate plea in her violet eyes. "Please," she whispered, her voice like wind through broken glass. "Just feed my child. I'll do anything." Marcus had seen plenty of desperate people over the years, drifters, refugees, folks down on their luck. Usually, he'd offer water and point them toward town, but something about her struck him differently. Beneath her exhaustion lay a fierce determination, like a blade dulled but not broken. Without a word, he reached into his pack and tossed her an energy bar. She tore it open with shaking fingers, eating as if she hadn't seen food in weeks. He pointed toward his barn, and she understood, staggering toward it on unsteady legs. That night, she curled up on a hay bale beside the old milking equipment, using burlap sacks for warmth. Marcus brought her water and said nothing. There was a quality to her rest that wasn't peaceful but watchful, as if she never stopped listening for danger. As he closed the barn door, he whispered, "Who the hell are you?" The question would haunt him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. By morning, she was already working. The sun hadn't crested the horizon when Marcus stepped out with his coffee to find her crouched beside the western irrigation trench, her forearms moving with precision that would shame most farmhands. One arm was wrapped in makeshift bandages, clearly damaged, but the other three worked with incredible efficiency. She was humming something ancient and rhythmic that seemed to make the very earth listen. As sunlight caught her form, Marcus saw what he'd missed in yesterday's fading light: burned scars across her shoulder, the kind that came from energy weapons, and skin that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly quality. "You know what you're doing," he said, approaching carefully. "Yes," she replied simply, not looking up from rewiring a sprinkler junction. "Ever farmed before?" "No, but I've survived worse." Marcus studied her face, angular features framed by that strange blue-black hair, eyes the color of distant nebulae. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Zara? I'm Marcus." And that was it. No long explanations, no elaborate histories, just two names exchanged between people too tired for anything but truth. By noon, she'd repaired his eastern fence, recalibrated 3 irrigation drones, and fashioned a new tiller head from scrap metal. When he offered her more food, she sat beneath the old grain silo and ate with slow, deliberate focus, as if each bite was a small victory against a universe that had tried to starve her. That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about hands that worked soil like they'd always belonged there, and a woman who'd crawled out of desperation not to be saved, but to offer something before she fell apart. The days that followed settled into a pattern neither planned but both embraced. Zara rose before dawn, slipping from the barn barefoot, moving through the fields with an eerie grace that Marcus still couldn't fathom. She optimized the solar array so efficiently it fed surplus energy back to the county grid, and sang softly to the crops in a language that predated human speech. Her songs were haunting melodies that made the wind pause and birds fall silent, as if the very land stopped to remember something ancient. Marcus worked alongside her when he could, maintaining the storage systems and keeping the business side running. But no matter his decades of experience, she always seemed 3 steps ahead. She never asked for instructions, never hesitated, yet never acted entitled. Once, Marcus tried to offer her payment. Zara looked at the cash like it was diseased metal. "That currency won't grow anything," she said simply. What she needed was something rarer: purpose, place, presence. The neighboring farms weren't so accepting. By week's end, whispers reached Marcus through Ed Kowalski, the feed supplier. "That thing in your barn, they say she's some kind of genetic experiment, built for war, not farming." Marcus didn't argue. He just loaded his grain order and left, but the whispers persisted. She was dangerous, unnatural, someone's former weapon. No one understood her scars or how she could diagnose equipment failures with a glance. Zara knew what they said. Her shoulders tensed when they passed town, and she avoided crowds, smiling. Only when she thought no one was watching. One evening, as the horizon blazed gold behind a cloud of pollen, they sat beneath the old water tower after a particularly long day. Her arms bore rust stains from replacing a turbine, and her knuckles were scraped from a fall. "You ever think about leaving?" Marcus asked. She didn't answer immediately. "Every day." "Then why stay?" She stared at that burning horizon, violet eyes, reflecting the light. "Because this place doesn't ask me to be more than what I already am. When I walk these rows, the soil doesn't flinch." Marcus leaned back against the tower's steel supports. "I'm glad you stayed." Something in her expression shifted, not softened, but steadied. "Me too," she whispered, and for the first time, it didn't sound like mere survival. It sounded like trust. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived on a Tuesday, her government sedan looking absurdly out of place among the farm trucks. She was tall, professional, with kind eyes that didn't quite hide her purpose. She claimed to be conducting an agricultural survey, but Marcus saw how her gaze lingered on Zara. "Unusual growing techniques," Elena observed, watching Zara coax impossible yields from depleted soil. "Where did she learn them?" "Experience," Marcus replied curtly. That night, Elena revealed her true purpose. She was a xenobiologist, and word of Zara's presence had reached certain government circles. "She's not from here, is she?" Elena asked gently. "And she's running from something." Marcus felt his world tilt. "What do you want?" "To help," Elena said. "If they're hunting her, she needs protection. Legal protection." Zara listened from the porch, having approached silently. "They'll never stop," she said, stepping into the light. "I was made in a laboratory on a world you've never heard of, designed to manipulate matter at the molecular level. I escaped before they could sell me to the highest bidder." Elena nodded slowly. "Then we need to make sure they can't take you back." For the first time in months, Marcus saw something new in Zara's eyes, not just trust, but hope. 3 weeks later, the storm came, not the gentle Montana rains that blessed the farmland in soft waves, but a savage system born in the Arctic and armed with winds that could strip paint from steel. Marcus had seen it approaching on radar, praying it would pass them by. It didn't. The early winds demolished the new greenhouse before they could secure it properly. Zara saw the collapse before Marcus did, running faster than physics should allow. She braced the frame with her body, shouting for him to reroute the stabilizers while she held tons of twisted metal and glass. Then the lightning began, not the familiar electrical discharge of earthly storms, but something alien in its patterns. Marcus recognized the frequency signatures immediately from his engineering background. "This isn't natural," he shouted over the wind. "Someone's controlling it." Zara's eyes went wide with terror and recognition. "Quantum manipulation, syndicate, technology." Her voice cracked with fear. "They found me." Marcus's heart dropped. "Who found you?" Instead of answering, Zara thrust him backward and raised her hands to the sky. The intricate tattoos along her arms, marks Marcus had assumed, were decorative, blazed with green-white light. She channeled something through her very bones, screaming words in her native tongue that made the air itself vibrate. The lightning paused mid-strike, as if uncertain what force it had encountered. Then it veered away, striking the empty field, and sending a geyser of earth skyward. They hit the ground together, ears ringing from the concussion. After a moment of stunned silence, Marcus rolled over and coughed out dirt. "Care to explain that?" Zara lay still, then turned to him with eyes full of rain and regret. "I was engineered on Kepler for to be built to manipulate electromagnetic fields. I escaped during a prisoner transport, but I never thought they'd track me across interstellar space." Marcus didn't flinch. "Well," he muttered, "next time warn me before you arm wrestle a lightning bolt." Despite everything, she laughed, a real laugh, rough and wild and cleansed by the storm. It echoed across the valley like thunder made gentle. They barely made it to the farmhouse before the next wave hit, but that night, for the first time, Zara slept inside. She took the couch beside the fireplace, her limbs twitching through uneasy dreams, while Marcus sat by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the storm burn itself out. Dr. Vasquez returned the next morning with a team of specialists and a mobile command unit disguised as agricultural equipment. The energy discharge was detected by 3 satellites, she told them grimly. "If we saw it, so did others." The team included Captain Sarah Rivera, a no-nonsense military liaison with cybernetic arm implants from her own encounter with alien technology. Dr. James Wright, a physicist who'd been studying interdimensional phenomena since the first contact incidents, and Lieutenant Tom Bradley, a communications expert who'd lost his hearing in a plasma storm and now relied on advanced implants. We can offer protection, Captain Rivera said, but you need to understand this changes everything. Earth's been in low-level contact with several alien civilizations for decades. Most people don't know, but your presence here makes you a valuable asset. I'm not an asset, Zara said firmly. I'm a refugee. Doctor. Wright leaned forward. The technology in your cellular structure could revolutionize agriculture, clean energy, maybe even space travel. But more importantly, you're proof that beings can transcend their original programming. Zara looked at Marcus, uncertainty flickering in her violet eyes. What do you think? Marcus took her hand the first time he'd touched her so deliberately. I think you're not running anymore. And I think that's what scares them most. That night, as the team set up defensive perimeters around the farm, Zara and Marcus walked to their favorite spot by the water tower. The stars seemed brighter than usual, as if the storm had washed the sky clean. Are you afraid? She asked. Terrified, he admitted, but not of them. I'm afraid of losing what we've built here. She smiled, touching his face with her upper hand while her lower hands traced patterns in the air, small electromagnetic demonstrations that made the metal tower hum with harmonics. Then we'll build it stronger, she said. Together. The syndicate returned on a Tuesday morning, not as a storm or covert operation, but with the cold efficiency of a corporate acquisition. Their ship descended like a chrome nightmare, blocking out half the Montana sky, a diplomatic vessel that reeked of bureaucratic entitlement. Marcus was already outside when Zara emerged from the farmhouse, now wearing clothes Elena had brought, her practical work gear that made her look more human, though nothing could hide the otherworldly grace of her movements. The defensive team took positions around the property, but Zara raised a hand. I won't fight here, she said firmly. Not where we planted our dreams. Marcus nodded and stood beside her, arms crossed in a stance that had become as familiar as breathing. They'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, he felt strangely calm. The syndicate emissary was elegant in the way of those who'd never worked with their hands, tall, draped in nano armor that shimmered with corporate insignia. When he spoke, his voice carried the casual authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Zara, designation X-47, he began, your operational period has exceeded acceptable parameters. We're here to correct this administrative oversight. She's nobody's property, Marcus said, stepping forward. Not anymore. The emissary's gaze flicked over the farm dismissively. You've been harboring stolen technology, Mr. Chen. That makes you complicit in grand theft and unlawful appropriation of corporate assets. Zara's eyes never left the emissary's face. You didn't come to collect property. You came because I embarrassed you by choosing growth over destruction, because I became something you never authorized. Captain Rivera's team maintained their positions, weapons ready, but not raised. Dr. Vasquez stood with her tablet, recording everything for the legal proceedings that would inevitably follow. Reconditioning remains an option, the emissary said with practiced patience. You could return to productive service. Marcus felt rage build in his chest like a physical thing. You can try. What happened next wasn't violence, it was transformation. Zara stepped forward and pulled something from her pocket, a seed, impossibly complex, that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. She knelt and pressed it into the rich Montana soil, whispering a single word in her native language. The ground responded. Every system she'd touched over the months, irrigation drones, solar panels, even the grain silo sensors, came to life in a synchronized symphony of light and sound. The entire farm became a living testament to what she'd chosen to become. A shimmering dome of energy enveloped the property, not as a weapon, but as a declaration. The readings on Dr. Vasquez's instruments went wild as the dome broadcast Sarah's story, her choice, her transformation from weapon to gardener, across multiple frequencies that would be picked up by both Earth-based receivers and ships in orbit. This is my life now, Zara said, all four arms spread wide in a gesture that encompassed the farm, Marcus, everything they'd built together, planted, claimed, loved. The emissary's composure cracked slightly. The Syndicate Council will not accept this defiance. Let them come, Zara replied. I won't leave him, and I won't leave this ground. Lieutenant Bradley, monitoring communications, looked up from his equipment. Sir, we're receiving acknowledgement signals from 17 different sources. Word is spreading. Dr. Wright was practically vibrating with excitement. The quantum resonance is creating a permanent record in the planetary field. This moment it's being written into Earth's electromagnetic signature. The emissary hesitated, perhaps realizing that this had become larger than a simple asset recovery. We'll report your choice, but there will be consequences. As the syndicate vessel lifted and vanished into the sky, Zara turned to Marcus. For the first time since she'd collapsed at his property line, she looked truly free, not from fear, but from the weight of being something she'd never chosen to be. Marcus didn't say anything. He just opened his arms, and she stepped into them completely, not as a refugee or a weapon or an asset, but as the woman who had finally found the place where she belonged. So what happens now? Dr. Vasquez asked, lowering her tablet. Zara smiled, her violet eyes reflecting the Montana sky. Now we plant next season's crops. 6 months after the syndicate's departure, the farm had become something unprecedented, a quiet revolution growing in the heart of Montana. The crops yielded 3 times the normal harvest, not through aggressive genetic modification but through Zara's gentle coaxing of the soil's natural potential. Her songs in the morning had become as much a part of the landscape as the sunrise itself. The government team had evolved into friends. Dr. Vasquez split her time between documenting Zara's agricultural innovations and helping establish legal precedents for interstellar refugees. Captain Rivera oversaw security, but spent most of her time teaching Zara about Earth's military history, fascinated by someone who'd chosen to abandon warfare entirely. Dr. Wright published papers on the quantum mechanics of consciousness that revolutionized 3 separate fields of study. The town had changed too. What began as fearful whispers transformed into cautious respect, then genuine acceptance. Children would gather at the farm's edge after school, watching in wonder as Zara made flowers bloom with a touch, their parents no longer pulling them away, but lingering to ask quiet questions about soil composition and sustainable growing methods. One morning, young Amy Peterson approached with dirt-stained hands and wide eyes. "Are you magic?" she asked, staring up at Zara's scarred but radiant face. Zara crouched to meet her gaze, her forearms creating a protective frame around the child. "No, sweetheart. I'm just a gardener who learned to listen to what growing things need," Amy smiled, and ran back to her mother, who nodded gratefully in Zara's direction. It wasn't much, but it was everything, the seed of acceptance taking root in human hearts. Marcus watched these interactions like a man afraid to breathe, too deeply afraid the dream might shatter. But Zara never looked back toward the stars. She looked down into the rich Montana earth, into the root systems she'd nurtured, into the morning light refracting off solar panels she'd optimized with her bare hands. One evening, as a comet painted silver trails across the sky, Marcus found the courage to ask the question that had haunted him for months. "If they come back with force, will you still stay?" Zara was barefoot on the porch, wrapped in his jacket, sipping the chamomile tea he'd learned to make perfectly. She didn't hesitate. "Even if the sky falls in fire," she said, "this place is mine, not because I claimed it, but because you gave me permission to belong here." Marcus took her hand, the gesture as natural as breathing now. "Then we'll face whatever comes, together." She laughed, that wild, warm sound that had become his favorite music, rising like wind through wheat fields under starlight. They never heard the final ship arrive. No warning lights, no sonic booms, just a gentle hum that was swallowed by the Montana breeze until shadow fell across the northern field. This vessel was different, ancient, carved from obsidian alloy and painted with stardust. Marcus had never seen anything like it, but Zara recognized it immediately. "The archivists," she whispered, "are replacing apprehension. I thought they were myths." When the ramp lowered, no weapons appeared. Instead, a figure emerged in robes that shifted like oil on water, carrying not a device, but a flowering branch, blossoms from a tree that grew only on Zara's birth world. In the secret gardens beneath the research facilities, the figure bowed, not to Marcus but to her. "X-47 has transcended," the archivist said in a voice like distant music. "The syndicate named you rogue, but you have taken root. The galaxy bears witness." Zara stood tall, her hands marked now with calluses and sunspots, tiny scars from farm work, rather than battle wounds. "I am no longer X-47. I am Zara Chen, of this soil, of this man, of this life I chose to grow." The archivist nodded solemnly. Then we shall record this, the first hybrid sanctuary, the first freedom that was planted, not taken. They departed with nothing but memory, leaving no scans or demands or threats. Just acknowledgement of something unprecedented, a being designed for destruction who had chosen to nurture life instead. When they were gone, Marcus pulled Zara close beneath the evening stars. "Chen?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. She grinned, that expression transforming her alien features into something utterly, recognizably human. "You feed someone, give them a home, survive storms and corporate raiders together. What else do you expect?" He kissed her then, under the Montana sky, with the scent of growing things surrounding them and the promise of tomorrow's harvest in the air. That autumn, the fields produced more than any season on record. But what mattered wasn't what grew from the ground, it was what had grown between them. Love that transcended species, belonging that no one could revoke, and hope that had taken root in the most unlikely soil. In the barn, Marcus hung a hand-carved sign, Zara Chen First Seed, forever. And in the house they now shared, two beings from different worlds planned for a future that would be written not in corporate databases or government files, but in the annual rings of trees they planted together, in the children who would grow up thinking four-armed gardeners were perfectly normal, and in the quiet revolution of choosing love over the purposes others had designed for them, the farm became a pilgrimage site of sorts, not for tourists, but for those seeking proof that transformation was possible, that even the most programmed hearts could learn to choose their own growth. And every morning, as the sun rose over the Montana plains, Zara would sing to the soil in the language of her birth world, while Marcus worked beside her in comfortable silence, both of them tending the impossible garden they'd grown from nothing but trust, patience, and the radical belief that everyone deserves a place to call home.